Greetings to everyone. Hope I can be loud and clear, and we'll try to have a great message and a blessed message here today. I'd like to open up with Ezekiel chapter 1. I'm going to go to verse 28, reading from the Old King James Version. As the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spoke to me. Let's consider some history. This is the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel was here at the river Kabar, and this is a tributary from the Euphrates River. He and many of his fellow countrymen were deported by the Babylonians, King Nebuchadnezzar. There were 3 deportations that took place from a time frame of 604 BC to 585 BC. He is part of the second deportation. And here he is, a young man about 30 years of age, and he sees this great vision from God. And God gives him a very special, very powerful message. One that all the Church of God should remember for all times. I'm going to continue in Ezekiel chapter 2 at this point, starting in verse 1. And he said unto me, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak unto thee. And the Spirit entered into me when he spoke to me, and set me upon my feet, that I heard him that spoke to me. And he said to me, Son of man, I send thee to the children of Israel. Take note. I send you to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that hath rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me even unto this very day. For they are impudent children and stiff-hearted. I do send thee unto them, and thou shalt say unto them, Thus said the Lord God. Verse 5, I continue with verse 5. And they, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house, yet shall know that there hath been a prophet among them. They will know a prophet has been among them with this special message and what takes place because of it. Verse 6, and you, son of man. So he's calling Ezekiel this son of man title. Be not afraid. Listen carefully here. Be not afraid of them. Neither be afraid of their words. Don't worry about their harsh language towards you. Don't worry about it. My Spirit is in you. Briars and thorns be with thee, and thou dost dwell among scorpions. Be not afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks. They're going to have some hard expressions. Don't worry about it. You can handle it. You can handle their hard expressions. My Spirit is with you. Though they be a rebellious house, verse 7, and thou shalt speak my words unto them, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are most rebellious. But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth. Speak these words that I tell you, and eat that I give thee. And when I looked, behold, a hand was sent unto me, and lo, a roll of a book was therein. And he spread it before me, and it was written within and without. There was written therein lamentations and mourning and woe. As we go over to chapter 3, we have this same commission. And God is driving this message home to Ezekiel. there is a warning. There is a message that he is to give to the house of Israel. If I look here at chapter 3 of Ezekiel, I want to make mention that the language here is very similar, but also in verse 17, if we go over now to verse 17, chapter 3, it mentions there, Son of man, I have made thee a watchman. I have made you a watchman. For who? The house of Israel. Therefore, hear the word at my mouth, and give them the warning. Give them the warning. You are my watchman. I have chosen you. Give the house of Israel this warning. The message is for them. Now, I want us to consider some history. I mentioned some years a little bit ago. I mentioned the deportations that were taking place. And Ezekiel is a Jewish man of the house of Judah. He is a young man, about 30 years of age. He is a priest and he is a prophet. And he is, at this time in history, about 593 BC. The deportation, the second one, happened about 597 BC. And it finishes, there's a total conquering of Jerusalem at about 585 BC. So those three deportations roughly expand about 19 years. And here he is, part of the house of Judah. Remember, he's part of that southern area. His capital was Jerusalem. But there is the northern tribes that are now gone. You see, remember, they were taken captive. They were conquered 721 to 718 BC. 125 years before this. So what exactly is going on here? This is interesting, isn't it? He's got to give them a message, but where are they now? Where have they gone? He knows what happened. He knows the history. He knows the story. But they're not there. They were gone 125 years ago. Where is he going to find them? I have a question for you. I have a question for all of us. When does Ezekiel record this message? When does he record this message, this commission he receives from God? When in his book does he record it? Where is it? Where does he say in the book of Ezekiel, in the record here, here I have given the message I was commissioned by the great God. Here I've given it to the house of Israel. When does this occur? The answer, it never does. There are things for us to consider. First, history once again. We need to be reminded that there was a division that occurred. And remember Jacob, who became Israel. There were 12 separate tribes ultimately that came from him, that they were related. But they are still 12 different families, ultimately. Eventually, they divided. Let's remind ourselves of what happened. Of course, we have King David, that great king. Not a perfect man, but a man after God's own heart. His son Solomon reigns after David is gone. Solomon takes over, the wisest man, the richest man on earth at that time probably. And the Israelites are doing well. But things begin to change. There are other influences happening in the kingdom. And the Israelites are still united at this time. But Solomon does do heavy taxation. He receives foreign influences, does he not, as we remember. And they change his heart. They change him and sway him in different directions. Later, you may recall his son Rehoboam. He now has the throne. And Rehoboam is pouring on the taxes of all Israelites everywhere. But the house of Israel, the 10 tribes, they come to Rehoboam at one point and they say, Rehoboam, the burdens upon us are heavy. Ease our burdens, please. Rehoboam tells them, you come back in 3 days. I'm going to think things over. I'm going to get some advice, and we'll talk about it in 3 days' time. Rehoboam goes to the older advisors that his father had, and they tell him, Rehoboam, ease the burdens on the people. If you do so, they will follow you. They will stay with you. He seeks out the advice of the younger men, probably in their 30s or so. People that were his friends, close friends perhaps. And they tell him, Rehoboam, you tell these Israelites who the king is. You tell him, you thought my dad was a tough guy? My little pinky is thicker and stronger than my father's torso. You tell them that, Rehoboam. 3 days elapse. They come to him and they say, Rehoboam, will you ease our burdens? Will you ease the taxes on us and reduce harsh living conditions? Rehoboam says, no. I will show you who the king of Israel is. There begins the division. A division among the people of God. The Israelites. There's a northern and there is now a southern separation. Does that sound familiar? What does that sound like in our own history? I want to next go to some other verses that demonstrate that there is a separation between the Israelites as we continue to build upon our message today. I'm going to go to 1 Samuel. First Samuel, and I am at chapter 11, verse 8. Excuse me. And when he numbered them in Bezek, the children of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. Take note, there's a separation. There's the house of Israel, there's the house of Judah. They're being numbered separately. We go now to 2 Samuel chapter 2. 2 Samuel chapter 2, and here I go to I'm going to go to verse 4. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David. A very pivotal moment in the history of Israel. The house of Judah anoints him. Take note of that, please. King David is anointed king of the house of Judah. And they told David, saying that the men of Jabesh Gilead were they that buried Saul. Now, we go a little further. We stay with 2 Samuel, we go a little further, and we go to chapter 5. And here I start with verse 1. Then came all the tribes, take note, all the tribes of Israel to David unto Hebron, and spake, saying, Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. They know they're related. They know the history. They know Jacob, who became Israel. And then he gathers his boys around in Genesis 49, tells them, this is what's going to happen in the last days. in Genesis 49. But verse 2, I continue with 2 Samuel 5. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, thou wast he that led us out and brought us in Israel. And the Lord said to thee, thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel. So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. Now David is king over all the Israelites. Several years earlier, it was only the house of Judah. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. 40 years total. Verse 5 continues with interesting history. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. So now he rules over all of the Israelites. Take note of the separation. Take note of the separation. But they come together. They come together under King David. And they remain there through Solomon and just a little bit with Rehoboam. Earlier, I mentioned 1 Kings 12. I didn't mention 1 Kings 12, but I mentioned the episode there that deals with Rehoboam. That's where the division occurs. If we look at 2 Samuel 24:9, we also see there a census taken. And the census counts the house of Israel separate from the house of Judah, although they were still united at that point. Now, there's other scriptures that indicate a separation, or a difference at least, between the house of Judah and the house of Israel. If we go to 2 Kings, 2 Kings is very poignant in history, biblical history especially. 2 Kings 16. I go there next. 2 Kings 16, I want us to look at verses 5 through 7. Starting in verse 5, 2 Kings 16. Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to war, and they besieged Ahaz. Now Ahaz was the king of Judah at this time. But notice, there's a Syrian king and the king of Israel. And they are trying to besiege Ahaz, the king of Judah, but could not overcome him. Now verse 6. At that time Rezin, king of Syria, recovered Elath to Syria, and drave the Jews from Elath. Notice I just read the word Jews there. That is the first time in all of the Bible that Jews are mentioned. In 2 Kings 16:6. And the Syrians came to Elath and dwelt there unto this day. Verse 7. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Syria and out of the hand of the king of Israel, which rise up against me. Did you notice that? I know you did. The Jews, it's not just the Jews in Israel. There's other countries, other tribes involved here too. But the Jews and Israel are fighting one another. The house of Israel, the north, the house of Judah, the south, are fighting one another. Similar to our civil war in our country, the north versus the south. Jerusalem is the capital city of Judah. The capital city of the north is Samaria at this time. We often hear of the modern state of Israel today. And they are Israel. They are modern Israel, and they are Jews. But they are perhaps two tribes of all Israelites. Fascinating. Fascinating, but true. Looking at biblical knowledge very closely. and other historical knowledge as well. Now, Jesus Christ did not forget these tribes. Ezekiel receives this message, and he receives commission on, you must give this message to the house of Israel. But they're conquered by the Assyrians and they're now gone. So back to Ezekiel for a moment, and now to the time of Jesus Christ. What did Jesus Christ say in Matthew 10, 5 through 7? Go to the lost tribes of Israel. Jesus Christ didn't forget them. Maybe some of the world, or much of the world, forgot them. Jesus Christ did not. Go to the lost tribes of Israel. Get this message to them. That's Matthew 10, verses 5 through 7. Something interesting. Elder Mike Reese did a scripture reading from Ephesians. I'm going to go back there right now because it pertains very much to the Ezekiel message and warning. You see, Ezekiel never got the message to the house of Israel. He probably didn't know where they were to begin with, but he recorded it. So what's the message for the church of God with the prophet Ezekiel's written record of prophecy? What is the message for the church of God? The book of Ephesians will shed some light on this. Ephesians chapter 2. So Ephesians 2, I will start at verse 18. For through him we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. Now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God. You become God's people. You become God's child. You are part of his church. You are part of the ecclesia, the called out ones. And we are one in the Spirit. Verse 19, Ephesians 2. Now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God. Verse 20. And are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets. Built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets. The words of Ezekiel are for God's church and God's people today. You see, the church of God is built upon precisely what it says. The apostles and the prophets. That's how the church of God is built. And Jesus Christ, the chief cornerstone, the head of his people, the head of the church of God. You see, my friends, Ezekiel recorded the message for another time, another place. And you see, the watchmen are the people of God. We take on the role of the Ezekiel watchman. It is for us today. It is for now. It is for our time. Ezekiel never got them the message. He never gave it to them. He recorded it. But we just read what Ezekiel recorded is that builds the foundation for the church of God. It's very plain. It's very easy to see. We are the watchmen. The church of God is the watchman for the house of Israel. We are the watchmen. We go now to Ezekiel chapter 33. I go to Ezekiel 33 here. I'll give you the verses here in just a moment. Ezekiel 33, I start at verse 1. Again, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of thy people, and say unto them, When I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coasts, and set him for their watchman, if when he seeth the sword come upon the land, he bloweth the trumpet, and warn the people, then whosoever heareth the sound of the trumpet, and taketh not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. Verse 5 now, Ezekiel 33. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him. But he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take any persons from among them, he is taken away in his land, in his iniquity. But his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. We have to be careful. If we don't promote the warning from Ezekiel, the blood of those out there is on our own heads. It's on the heads of the church of God. The church of God better get it together. Let's continue. So thou, son of man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore thou shalt hear the word at my mouth, and warn them from me. When I say unto the wicked, O wicked man, thou shalt surely die, if thou dost not speak to warn the wicked from his way, that wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at thine hand. Nevertheless, verse 9, nevertheless, if thou warn the wicked of his way, to turn from it, and if he do not turn from his way, he shall die in his iniquity, but thou hast delivered thy soul. The message is for you and I. It is for you and I to give. It is for you and I to promote. It is for you and I to teach about, for others and for ourselves, to be aware and to be alert. This is the Ezekiel watchman warning for the church of God. Now, I want to back up a little bit and go back to Ezekiel chapter 4. Ezekiel 4 paints a very interesting picture. And we're left to wonder a little bit, what exactly is happening. Now, this is earlier in the book of Ezekiel, of course. And it mentions there in a subtitle in my Bible, Siege of Jerusalem Portrayed. Now, some say, well, this is for the Jews. Look, Jerusalem is right there. Not so fast, my friends, not so fast. Let's read this carefully. Yes, the Jews are Israelites, and not all Israelites are Jews. But there are Israelites, and they have expanded and grown into bigger families at this point in time. But here, this is a message for Jewish people. But take note, let's look at this very carefully. Starting in verse 1. Thou also, son of man, take thee a tile and lay it before thee, and portray upon it the city, even Jerusalem. So that was the capital of the house of Judah, that southern portion, that southern region. But notice the language here. The word portray, I was looking at that in the Hebrew language, and the Hebrew word there is a word to engrave, or the Hebrew word is shakak or kakak, something pronounced like that. But it is to engrave, or being cut in stone, or creating something, a little figurine in stone or in a clay tablet of some sort. It's almost as if, as we read this closely, in verses 2 and 3, it appears that Ezekiel is getting this message from God, and he's creating a picture or an image of how Jerusalem is going to be besieged. It's as if he has like these toy soldiers in front of him. He's creating and playing with and creating a picture of what is going to happen. And it did happen a little bit later in 585 BC. But we're not finished yet. Let's read verses 2 and 3. And lay siege against it, and build it against it, and cast it a mount against it, and the camp also against it, and set battering rams against it round about. Moreover, take thou unto thee an iron pan, and set it for a wall of iron between thee and the city, and set thy face against it, and it shall be besieged, and thou shalt lay siege against it. Notice the last part. Notice the last part here. This shall be a sign to the house of Israel. This shall be a sign to the house of Israel. But they were already besieged. They were already taken over. And we know that. We know that. Again, a future picture here. A future picture. And it is now in the hands of the church of God. It is in the hands of God's people. Not just the Church of God International, but all God's people everywhere. So we have to be at one. We have to get the message. See, if we don't love one another, we can't be a great witness for God. We're not following the example that Jesus Christ requires of us. We can't make excuses. We can't point fingers. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not going to work, I promise you. I'm going to continue here. I'm going to stay with the prophet Ezekiel, and I now want to go to Ezekiel chapter 16. And this just drives home the point even more. I'm at Ezekiel 16. I will read verse 53. When I shall bring again their captivity, notice, when I shall bring again their captivity, they were already captive. You mean they got out of captivity and now they're somewhere else and be captive again? Yes, I shall bring again their captivity. It's not talking about 721, 718 BC. That's 125 years previous to this. They were taken over by the Assyrians. They eventually left their rule and they migrated primarily through Western Europe, the British Isles, and across the Atlantic. And that's probably not it. That's probably not the end of the story. We can get very intricate with all the house of Israel and all their dwelling places. That's not the purpose for today, however. A little bit of the purpose for today, but not the only purpose.